Today is truly a significant milestone in securing our nation's supply chains and strengthening America's national security.
This is the kickoff ceremony for a mine, which the owners say could be critical to America's military success.
For too long, we've relied on foreign sources for critical materials essential to our national defense. A prime example is antimony sulfide.
Antimony, the mineral they'll be mining, is used to make munitions. The company that owns the mine, Perpetua Resources, has been awarded $80 million of federal funding as part of an effort to make America self-sufficient in critical minerals.
Let's have the general come in.
But some wonder if what's underground will ever make it into a round of ammunition.
So a lot of this mine's critics have raised some serious questions about both the quantity and the quality of the antimony that it contains.
Or if the real objective is something more valuable.
In essence, all this public land here is being privatized for the company's profits.
It's basically helping subsidize a billionaire's gold project.
You talk about Idaho being the gem state and mining interests, but the real jewels of the state are the fish in the stream. We're concerned about permanent loss of the spawning habitat and chemical contamination from mining activities that could contaminate the watershed.
John Robison and Will Tiedemann work for Idaho Conservation League. The group is suing the Forest Service and other federal agencies that have granted permits to reopen a mine in this remote backcountry.
The big concern is, what's the water quality going to be in this drainage during and after mining? Once materials have been mobilized that could contaminate water supplies, they persist for decades, if not centuries.
It's not the first time the area has been mined.
We're looking down on the Yellow Pine Pit, which is an abandoned open pit with the East Fork, South Fork Salmon River cascading down into it. The river was highly contaminated by decades of mining.
Back in the Second World War, antimony, the mineral found here, was at the heart of America's munitions production.
In 1940, FDR had set production goals for 50,000 aircraft. Now shells, guns, ships, and tanks all poured off American assembly lines.
Antimony is used in more than 300 types of munitions. Without antimony, lead bullets would be soft and howitzers would not fire. And if you take the sulfur out of it, it becomes a flame retardant.
The Stibnite mine provided 90% of the antimony used by the Allies, but fell out of use as America began importing antimony as it was cheaper than making it at home.
This mine provided antimony all the way through World War II into the early 1950s. After that, it was more or less abandoned.
The nearest town, Yellow Pine, now has only 35 residents. And despite the sustained attempts of one company to reopen the mine, it failed to get the necessary backing until now.
So in 2011, a company called Midas Gold purchased the mine. And over the years, it's been trying to get through the permitting process, pushing itself as effectively under the Biden administration as an ally in the green economy because of antimony's use in lead-acid batteries, storage for solar panel energy fields.
But in 2021, China started restricting the supply of military-grade antimony to the U.S. before cutting it off completely in 2024.
You're being told that your biggest supplier, in this case China, has now called up and said, you can't have any antimony. That is a problem. It set off a panic button within not only the Pentagon, but across the halls of government.
That sparked a big process within the Defense Department in particular to try to find other sources.
Within a few months of China cutting off the antimony, the newly elected president took action.
Several weeks after the inauguration, Donald Trump issued an executive order that basically commanded the United States to set out to develop domestic supplies of critical minerals.
Midas Gold, now rebranded as Perpetua Resources, saw an opportunity.
The company Perpetua started calling itself a solution to our national security crisis.
The main shareholder is this man. His name is John Paulson.
John Paulson is a billionaire investor. He is also a supporter of Donald Trump. And during the re-election campaign for Donald Trump, he held a big fundraiser where he raised over $50 million for Trump.
And with Trump in the White House, the mine's fortunes began to change. A month after Trump's executive order in March, Paulson hired a new lobbying company, chaired by Reince Priebus, Trump's former chief of staff. Lobbyists for Perpetua have made visits to the White House, the Defense Department, and Congress, federal disclosures show. In May, Perpetua received the final federal permits for the mine. But Paulson's interest in the mine isn't just about antimony.
It is not uncommon to find geologically antimony and gold in the same ore deposits. And that's what we had going on here.
John Paulson is very interested in this mine because it's going to provide gold.
In Perpetua's mine, although most of the ore here is antimony, the majority of revenue will come from gold.
As of January 2026, the value of the gold in this mine is approaching $19 billion.
A prospect that excited John Paulson on a recent investor call.
I am bullish on the outlook for gold. If the price goes up, you get a greater impact if you own a mining company. I couldn't be more excited about our equity investment in Perpetua.
This play for gold has angered conservationists.
Under the mining law of 1872, mining companies don't have to pay any royalties for gold or other precious minerals taken from public land. This is in contrast to oil and coal and gas, where the public does get a royalty back. In this case, there's no royalties, and the mining company gets all the profits from the gold. In essence, all this public land here is being privatized for the company's profits. If we're really trying to restore this site and extract some mineral wealth out of this, it would have required leaving some gold underground. And I wish that the company had taken a harder look at that option.
When much of the West, and the American West specifically, was explored, there was relatively lots of easy gold to get. Now what's left is the much harder gold to get. And there's an economic break-even point where the harder gold now becomes economic to recover. But that comes at the expense of additional tailings, additional waste rock, additional impacts.
The method used for getting antimony and gold out of stibnite rock historically is very environmentally destructive. You need to add cyanide to it. The rock itself already contains arsenic. And historically at this mine, those tailings after that process were just put into piles and left to leach arsenic and cyanide into the water supply.
Right here would be the location of the tailing storage facility. It would be about 480 feet tall. That is about 30 feet taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza. By volume, the tailing storage facility could hold about 29 Great Pyramids of Giza. So covering a very vast, large area, vast amount of waste, toxic metals, arsenic stored within there.
Perpetua says that the liners that it's going to put in there, kind of like a giant burrito wrap, are as infallible as they can get, the state-of-the-art technology. But the environmentalists that I talk to say these tailings are going to be here for millennia. And there's no way that you can ensure that this will never, ever leach arsenic and cyanide into the environment.
Our first task in engineering and designing a mining project is, what is the safest plan available? And what does the science tell us? That the safest location to store the tailings and the waste is to build that tailing storage facility in the upper reach of Meadow Creek Valley.
Despite Perpetua's assurances about the mine, back in Washington, some officials voiced serious concerns.
The Defense Department gave Perpetua $80 million to figure out a way to get this antimony out of the ground. In the meantime, there was an ongoing conversation, even as the money was going out the door, that this was not money well spent. Sources of mine in Washington heard of an internal conversation in which there was one side saying, yes, this is the way to go, and another side saying, it's just never going to work.
Perpetua says that it can supply 100% of U.S. military needs.
The U.S. military requires antimony to be refined to 70.5%. Perpetua says it can refine its antimony to 54.3%, and that it would require additional processing off-site.
In the 1940s, you have this great grade supplying the Allied forces. And then you have a point where you've depleted the mine significantly. Half a century later, nothing's changed. It's still the same low ore grade. The question becomes, is it economically feasible to process it into the grade that you need at a gold mine that may or may not end up producing the antimony that's needed?
Back in Idaho, there's another opponent to the mine, arguing that the project also encroaches on ancient land rights.
This landscape right here has been what has taken care of our people for thousands of years. The fish and the roots that are here, the wildlife.
Emmett Taylor Jr. is part of the Nez Perce tribe, who have treaty rights dating back to 1863 to fish and hunt on this land.
We cannot lose these populations, not just for us, but for 7 generations down the road.
The Nez Perce tribe originally helped frontiersmen find gold in this area of Idaho. But as a result of that gold, they were then pushed into smaller and smaller areas of their own land.
So that's what gold has been to the Nez Perce people. It has taken our land away. It has taken so much from us. And so when we see another gold mine like this going in, we see the same thing happening.
The Nez Perce tribe is also suing the Forest Service and Department of Agriculture, saying the mine violates their right to the land and could endanger critical fish stock, including Chinook salmon. Mining is not due to start here until 2029, by which point it may no longer be the only source of domestic antimony.
Other options are now coming onto the table in a way that they wouldn't have 10 years ago. The question then is, should we have put all this money in there in the first place? And also, now that we know this, is it still worth our time moving forward?